you might want to groom with hundreds of hairs. So
Kita mulai
keep
dari
that in mind.
sebelah
So if we hit the preview
bola
button one more time,
untuk,
what
head.
we're going to get now is going to be
Saya create
something that looks
satu
pretty cool.
poly primitive aja. Saya bikin satu sphere, besarin, lonjongin
Alright,
sedikit.
so that looks alright. I want to further
Kalau
modify
biasanya
this.
masih
So
bulat,
I want to make it a little bit
aja
thinner.
lonjongnya,
I want the
taruh
strands
banyak
or the primitive instance geometry to be a little bit thinner. So if you remember, this is being driven
Lalu
by that
kemudian
length map, right? So if we
di
go back to our
sini
grooming,
akan
and
saya
you would think that I could just say, you know what, let me change this value to a value of 0.2, and that would actually
jadi
capture that
subdivision
change.
lebih
Unfortunately, this is sort of I'd say it's almost like a workflow issue or maybe even a bug.
juga.
These values won't
Okay.
get transferred back into that
Betul.
mapping information unless visibility is turned on. So you just have to make sure that visibility is turned on before you change that value for it to actually get transferred over to the map, which ultimately then drives the primitive shape. So just keep that in mind. And you know what, while those are visible, I'm just going to grab this elevation brush. We'll clear this out here. I'm going to use that elevation brush. Oops, let's undo that. We'll use that elevation brush
Di
to
sini ada
pull out that range right there where it was caving in a little bit. I didn't like that.
aku
Alright, so with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to turn off that display, and we'll go back and we'll hit that preview one more time.
Oke, sini saya sculpt. Dengan sculpt saya bisa
So it takes just a couple seconds for this to happen,
merubah bentuknya.
and you'll notice that once the preview loads and finishes up here,
Karena
what we're
kecil,
displaying on the viewport is actually the default shader that's associated with these primitive splines. And it doesn't really capture the overall look and feel of this tiger very well at all. So what we want to do is we want to have some texturing information drive the effect of each instance spline. And this is really pretty straightforward to do. If we go to our preview output tab, you'll notice that in the preview settings we have primitive color, and this is an important concept. You have the ability to have the primitives in your preview represented with one set of mapping information, and the software rendering or the output settings use another set of mapping information. And this allows you to have the interactive view maybe do some diagnostics or something like that, and have the actual software renderer use the finished shader looks or shader maps that you want. So that's why it's broken out into two separate categories. For this example, what we're going to do is we're going to build everything up as far as our color information is concerned in the preview output section, in the preview section, and then we're going to copy that information to the output section where the software renderer can pick it up after we've got it looking good in the preview window. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get rid of that display there, and we're going to get rid of this region map that's driving our primitive color, and we're just going to create a new map. So when we hit the create map button, really what we're doing is we're actually, again, using an expression to pipe a map into this and load the 3D paint tool. So we'll set our texel resolution up to something like a value of 10. We'll call this color DT, and we'll go ahead and create that guy. So as soon as we do that, our hardware lighting gets turned off, so I'll hit my 7 key to turn that stuff back on, and we'll pull up our 3D paint tool. So anybody that's used Maya knows that the 3D paint tool is a UV based tool, and if you remember me mentioning earlier that XGen works exclusively with PTEX textures, so there's a little bit of a problem there, and we have a button that basically solves that problem for us. So if I just go ahead and I paint this little texture map on my character, and I click the save button, you'll notice that in the save button it also says bake PTEX maps to disk. So even though I've just painted on the, using a UV-based tool, as soon as I hit this save button, what we've done is we've converted that to a PTEX file and saved it off the disk. So now when we hit our preview button, XGen can reference to that PTEX file and use that to drive the color of each instance spline. Now that's all well and good if I wanted to manually paint every, the color maps on my character, and that's not really desired in this effect. I already have an awesome color map of those tiger stripes on the shader for this character. So what we're going to do is a pretty cool little trick or hack to basically grab that texture map and pipe it into this node, this kind of workflow, and have it get converted to a PTEX map directly inside of Maya, without actually having to go out to something like Mudbox to generate the PTEX map. So this is a pretty cool trick. So let's go ahead and blow away our preview of that guy, grab our piece of geometry that's got the shader associated with it, go to our node editor and just graph that guy. So you'll see that,
Select,
let's just
biasa.
hit our 5 key and clear that up
Select
here. You'll
aja,
see that we've got piped into this guy, we've got this map, and if we hit 2 on this guy and 2 on this guy, you'll see that the out color is being thrown into this DT color attribute that we added onto that XGen description. So all we have to do is go grab our texture map of our fur and repipe this guy in. So we're going to grab the out color of this guy and shove it into that guy. So now we've got the right map going into that custom color attribute that we've defined here. So all we have to do is just go ahead and hit the save button, because again that's going to convert UV maps to PTEX maps. And now in a few seconds we'll hit the preview button and we're going to get the XGen description, each instance piece of geometry getting its color from that original texture map that's assigned to the shader on our character. So it's a pretty cool little trick to hijack that convert button and have it use any texture map inside of your scene. So now you can see we've got, you know, some pretty awesome looking fur showing up in Viewport 2.0 on our Tiger. So the next thing that we need to do is get this information down into the software renderer. So you remember I mentioned that when I hit that create map button, it really was just writing an expression to tie that attribute to a map. That map's been saved to this path on disk, and then that's the command to pull up the 3D Paint tool at a texel resolution of 10. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this guy and we're going to copy it, because we don't want to redo that work. We're just going to basically go down to our output settings and pass this information into the shading network. So this again is another kind of quirky workflow inside of XGen, but once you know about it, it's really quite powerful. What I want to do is I want to have each individual instance piece of geometry be driven by a custom attribute, a custom shader attribute called root color. So there's custom shading attributes for the root color and the tip color. If you provide Maya only with the root color, the whole spline all the way down the length of it is going to be that same root color. If you give it a root color and a tip color, it'll interpolate down the length of that spline. So you can have the base of it look one color and the tips of it become another color. So it's very powerful. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch this from float to color, and the naming of this is very important. So just call it root underscore color, and we'll go ahead and we'll hit the create button on this guy, and in this we're just going to change that attribute to be driven by that expression that we made earlier that's basically driving the preview of our characters Viewport 2.0 display. So we'll bring up our render view and we'll just click the render last button here and we'll get our nice tiger effect happening.
Tadi yang lebih panjang bukan lebih pendek ya, saya salah. Lebih panjang.
So here you can see the final gather pass comes through and then the final render pass comes through.
Ada ujung-ujungnya kan. Jadi kita twirl sedikit di situ.
And this is just lit with a simple sun sky system, so there's really nothing fancy happening here. I've got the exposure cranked down a little bit, so we're just rendering this out as a linear file, and then there's an sRGB profile put on the render view. So that tiger looks like I got the fur a little bit too long there. He looks a little fluffy and fat, but still pretty cool effect. I think the specularity might be a slight bit too hot on that, but it gives you a quick introduction to working with XGen and a couple of tips and tricks when doing short hair effects inside of Maya. Next, we're going to be looking at some tips and tricks for working with longer hair inside of XGen. So what we want to do is we want to have a new hair description added to our character that's going to basically try to match the overall look and feel that I have in this modeled geometry. And this is going to be done using a tube groom workflow. So this gives us a very art-directable approach to generating the guides that ultimately drive our instance splines for our longer hair. So let's go ahead and select the piece of geometry, which is our character's scalp, and you'll notice that I've limited the number of faces. This is a good thing for workflow, to always try to have the least number of faces that you're going to use to generate your descriptions from. And we're going to go and create a new description for that selection, and we'll call it Hair 3, and we'll put this in the folder called Sven for the collection, and it's going to be a spline for long hair, and we're going to be placing this using guides. So we'll go ahead and we'll create that, and the next thing that we need to do